Alright, let me just try and decode some of these notes from a year ago. Hello humans, my name is Dael Kingsmill. I have another D&D video for you today, as I'm sure you could guess by the title. There's a lot of new people who've joined us here. Welcome, thank you. So I should explain for their benefit. About a year ago, on Twitter, I posted a poll. No caption, no context. The options of the poll were giants or Kraken. And all the people who follow me on Twitter voted without any context, and they voted for the Kraken because they like the Kraken better. And so I made a video about giants. The theory was that people would most naturally vote for the thing they like more as is, so the other option, the option that lost, needs a little help, a little booster to be even cooler than it is. So it was tricksy reverse psychology, but some people have been waiting for the Kraken video ever since. Because fool that I am, I mentioned in the Giants video that I was gonna do the Kraken soon. Ooh, why did I say that? So anyway, here I am, I'm finally doing the Kraken video. Some people love the Monster Manual Cthulhu-y version of the Kraken that we already have. You know, the official published Kraken, and those people probably gonna hate these ideas, and that's fine. That's fine. This is not an advice channel where I tell you how you should be doing things. This is MonarchsFactory, where sometimes I make videos that share my ideas, and maybe sometimes people take little pieces of those ideas as inspiration, and they make it the foundation on which they build their own ideas. Seeds from which you may grow something of your own. Did you know that the word Kraken comes from Swedish and Norwegian, the word kraka, a word which is used to designate like an unhealthy animal, and has connotations of something that is twisted or corrupted. I find that fascinating. It also might not be true. I got that from Wikipedia. Also, it's only around the 18th century, apparently, that the Kraken started to be described as having arms and taking on more of that octopusy, squiddy appearance that we associate with the Kraken now. But here's the thing, I mean, unpopular opinion for an amateur mythographer such as myself, but sometimes I just really like the version of a legendary creature that has turned up in people's cultural consciousness. You know, like we think about a werewolf now, and we think, oh yeah, killed by a silver bullet, right? I also feel like there's a little bit more wiggle room to use more modern sort of interpretations of the Kraken, because the Kraken is one of those creatures that doesn't really show up in many stories. Again, I could be totally wrong about this. My specialty is the Greek myths, not the Nordic ones. But from what I know and from what I have been able to research, the Kraken is kind of, you know, it's like how griffins are a mythical creature, and we know that they're a mythical creature, but there's not that many stories floating around that actually feature griffins. I want the Kraken to feel more like the modern version of the Kraken, our modern understanding of what a Kraken is, then I'm not diving back into the deepest records of Krakens. For me, the terror of the sea and its unknowable depths, that's enough. This colossal creature of the depths, of the freezing dark places in the ocean. I don't need the Kraken to be an intelligent psychic, to be scary, to be formidable. I also have kind of just a running thing with me and how I run games. I like to dole out my magic sparingly, not in terms of like items or high fantasy or anything like that, but in terms of if a creature doesn't need to be magical in order to achieve what the creature is, then to me it shouldn't be magical at all. So for me, I just want the Kraken to be a friggin' huge, terrifying sea monster. I want this to feel like you are up against a force of nature. So at the crux of all of this, I'm taking the emphasis off the Kraken making attacks and turning an encounter with the Kraken more into something that is happening. You can't stop it from happening. So the question becomes, can the heroes defend against it? Can they survive this thing? So in relation to that, I kind of want the Kraken to be the Kraken, singular. There is not a species of Krakens to me. What were they called in their previous edition? On-Shaylin? Is that a real word? I hope that is. No, I want it to be a singular threat. Wow, Dael, that's so unusual for you. That's so groundbreaking. You've never done that before. My notes from the past. The Kraken, one and only. All right, so with that in mind, I feel like You've got one chance to really wow your players with a Kraken encounter. But you know what you can do is you could build up to it with almost encounters. There's a quote from one of the early Kraken texts that I was reading, one of the first sort of written references to the Kraken. And it says, "The real danger to sailors was not the creature itself, but rather the whirlpool left in its wake." Ooh, yeah. So let's think about that for a minute. A creature that big. So we're talking you know what I mean? So imagine a creature that huge surfacing, what that's going to do to the water around any ships for miles. That water displacement is going to create what are basically stormy seas but with clear skies. Imagine that terror, the waves going crazy. You're trying to keep the boat from capsizing in these huge peaking waves, having to try and sail as quickly as you can towards the epicenter of it, because if those big waves break on you, you're done for. The waves get big enough, you have to go through them. I do not like the deep sea, and this is, conceptually terrifying. Or imagine in the other direction, the Kraken is up near the surface and suddenly it decides that it's going to descend, it's going to submerge deeper into the depths, and now you've got a whirlpool left behind as the water around it is all rushing to fill in that gap that it's left. Now this is getting a little bit classic Charybdis. Whole encounters or skill challenges could be built around just these moments of almost encountering the Kraken. Great time for your NPC sailors to start telling you spooky stories about the Kraken and people who've encountered it. Really build up that anticipation. Then once you build up to it, if you do want to have an actual face-to-face, near-death experience with the Kraken for your players, I reckon you got one shot. I think because I have conceptualized the Kraken as sort of just a beast, I don't think my version would fit as a boss necessarily. So I would probably have it be late game, but not end game. And yeah, just the goal is just surviving. And I think there are basically two main ways that you can encounter the Kraken that would be fun. On a boat at the water's surface, or an underwater encounter, fully submerged. And in order to make them both fun, I think you would have to handle them in very different ways. So I'm gonna go through both. At the water's surface, you're on a ship. The Kraken thinks that the ship is something big it can eat, and it's gonna try and grab the ship and pull it down. Classic imagery. Ooh, the way I envisage this sort of an encounter working would have to come in a couple of phases. I think you would start with the phase where it's just the tentacles that you're dealing with, trying to break the ship. Second phase, which we'll get to in a minute, is dealing with the bulk, the actual body of the Kraken itself. And then third phase is what comes after that. I like my Kraken to be octopusy rather than squid-like. And that is because to me, I don't think there is anything more alien on this earth than an octopus. They are crazy. I'm telling you, some of the research I did about octopuses for this video the first time round, they've got these enzymes even after an octopus's leg, tentacle, leg, limb, whatever, gets severed and is, disembodied. It lives for a long time afterwards, and even then it will reach out. It will reach out and grab things automatically and try to feed the body that it isn't even attached. There's no body there and it's trying to feed a phantom body. It's like a phantom limb, but in the opposite direction. There's a lot going on there. But the biggest thing for me that I think is helpful in really giving a unique feel to this encounter is the way that an octopus moves outside of the water. If you've ever watched an octopus move on land, I'll put up a bam! Thank you to an Australian marine biologist. This is a video taken by Lawrence Shield. You can find him on Instagram at snorkeldownunder, all one word. But just look at this video for a second. The way that an octopus moves, see how it's, I've seen videos where it's more obvious because the octopus isn't just, traveling in a straight line, but there's this aspect to an octopus traveling on solid ground that is the tentacles doing all of the work for themselves. It's not like the octopus is looking where it's going. It's more like the tentacles are feeling their way sightlessly. And you'll get that ripple effect where it starts from the back and it moves forward as they go, and then it has to move. It pulls and it moves back in that same rippling manner. That's what I want. I don't want the tentacles like up in the air, doing the squiggly things, snatching people and throwing them so much. I want more of that, you know, tentacles slowly making their way onto the deck and feeling their way across the deck. While the sailors in your party are trying frantically to stop the tentacles from getting to the other side, because if the octopus can wrap around the ship, it'll be just such a cinch to just snap the hull in half, completely crush it, tear it in two, and pull it down. So for me, this first phase, I really want to keep up this pressure of like, time is running out. I would set a limit of maybe 3 rounds. I think doing the same thing for 3 rounds is fun. Doing the same thing for 4 to 5 rounds starts to drag. So for these first 3 rounds, before we change it up, I would like the focus to be these tentacles are making their way around the ship, and if you can't stop them in time from getting purchase, the Kraken will have broken the ship, and there's nothing that you can do to stop that. Now, in terms of like combat with these tentacles, it is a more straightforward-ish combat scenario when it's just the tentacle phase. The tentacles I want to be more about reacting than acting. So on their turn, they're just going to move. But if they come into contact with something, with a creature or with the mast or, you know, something like that, I like the idea of them being reactive and wrapping around that thing. It's like they're sussing it out, they're feeling it out, but because it is a Kraken, gigantic, ginormous son made of muscles, and just a beastie looking for a feed. If one of the tentacles bumps into the mast and reactively wraps around it, it could snap that mast. If the tentacle bumps into a sailor and wraps around that sailor, it could crush that sailor. Even if one of the tentacles doesn't wrap around a person that it bumps into, the suckers kind of automatically stick to anything. So there's that idea that even just while stretching across this space, crawling across this space to the other side, if this tentacle runs over someone, it's gonna be taking them with it. They might not be killed immediately if it's not specifically squeezing them, but it can't be good for them, and they're stuck. And them suckers is strong. Do you take the time to try and rescue the sailor, wrestle them out from under this arm? Or do you have to dedicate all of your time and energy to trying to stop the Kraken from destroying the ship?
I'm not going to be on camera for the next bit, but I'm dressed like this while filming the next bit, and the absurdity wasn't lost on me, and I needed you to know about it.
Alright, so here's just a really quick sketched battle map. So this is just going to be a really quick example of how I envisage this sort of setup working if you were to use a battle map. For my money, a chain would work best for this, you know, like a necklace chain. To me, a chain has the right sort of ratio of weight to flexibility. I mean, ideally it would be one of those chains, you know, the ones that they're more like those wooden snake toys that are like, ooh, ones that are like really tightly linked. Just because those ones, you know, they kind of have a curve to them by necessity. So if you have some of those around, that would be perfect, but any chain should do the job. Now what we're trying to do with this, we're trying to replicate that motion that we just saw in the video, the way that when an octopus arm is moving across solid ground, it doesn't lead from the end. It's not like it's searching from eyes, it's feeling, and it's got more of that movement from the base and then rippling outward. The chain can help with some of that, but you know, a lot of this will rely on you using words like, I don't know, slick and undulating. Get ready to squick your players out with your choice of adjectives. When you're setting things up, you're gonna want to start with a nice little curly kind of a shape. Ta-da! And imagine more of these. Instead of having a movement speed and starting from the tip and it just crawls around, because that doesn't look like how an octopus moves, and I really want to emphasize the weird alien way that an octopus moves. Instead of that, what we're going to be doing is alternating between 2 movement patterns. What you're going to do, and make sure that if your chain is too long like mine is, you know, keeping it pinned. You're going to pick a point sort of roughly in the middle of the chain, and it's going to move 3 squares. 1, 2, 3. All right, see how that unfolds there? Now the tip, you actually get to control where it goes much more directly. But to me, I think it's probably a good idea to encourage this impression of sightless feeling around, trying to understand its environment, if the tip has come in contact with something like a mast, then I recommend that you take the turn 1, 2, 3 squares to make the tentacle wrap around whatever that is. You get back there. All right, so see now it's wrapping around this mast. On its next round, you're going to move from the base instead, and this isn't going to look like movement, but it's going to give that impression of movement originating from the base and slowly rippling outwards. So you're going to pick the point at the base, and then you're going to move 3 squares as well. take a little bit of a, roundabout route with this. This tentacle, because it's wrapped around the mast, will probably focus on that and probably snap the mast. But then what about what would have happened if the tip hadn't been right next to the mast, hadn't reached out for it? Somewhere roughly in the middle, 3 squares, 2, 3. The tip gets to decide where it goes. It's gonna reach around here, 1, 2, 3, end up about there. On its next turn, we're going 1, 2, 3, and the tip 1, 2, 3 reaches to the other side. It's gonna start trying to snap the ship in half. Let's check some sailors on here. These are gonna be my sailors. These are party poppers from my backpack. All right, great. Now we got some sailors. Roughly in the middle. 1, 2, 3. Tentacle tip. 1, 2, 3. Oh, look where you are. Turn 2. Starting to wrap around this sailor. Oh no. Turn 3. 1, 2, 3. Gonna start to take the sailor with it. Oh no! Now the sailor's like trapped against the side of the ship and he's being crushed! Basically what we're going for here is just bizarre alien movement that fluctuates between curved and angular. These alternating rounds where you come from the base and then from the middle, you kind of get this weird vibe of there is movement, but where is it going? All it is a rough approximation of such alien movement that just reinforces the concept of this is something different to what we typically deal with. I think each individual tentacle would be a weak point for the Kraken, but by no means weak. I would, during this phase, give each individual tentacle its own kind of hit points, probably a ton of resistances, and really during this section, just let the players kind of go Nova trying to hack away as many of these tentacles as they can. But make sure that the hit points are hefty. And even though I think the tentacles are reactive, I think that encapsulates, once one of them starts getting hacked at with a big old battle axe, it's probably gonna start swinging, trying to hit back. So I want this to be difficult. Remember, it's a force of nature. This is the Kraken. If your players are successful, if they manage to hack away, I would say like 2 tentacles, I think at that point the Kraken is gonna start pulling back and being like, why? I thought you were just a whale or something that I could eat. If they're not successful, if they don't manage that, then the Kraken starts to split the ship in 2. And then we reach phase 2 of the encounter, what I like to refer to as the Sarlacc Pit Phase. Give me some good Sarlacc Pit style shenanigans. This phase is exciting and I think it's easy enough to get to whether your players have succeeded or not succeeded. Whether it comes in the form of the Kraken starting to pull away and the ship tipping to one side as that happens, or in the form of the ship splitting in 2 and starting to tip down inwards. I want this next phase to basically be, here's the Kraken's mouth, try not to fall into it. So now this becomes a whole separate sort of survival skill challenge where you're just trying not to slide down deck into the Kraken's waiting mouth. Now, this is where it starts getting exciting. I would love to do something like to emphasize the idea that this skin of the Kraken is just so tough. It's so hard to get through. And see if enough movies and TV shows have imprinted in one of your players' minds the idea. Don't give it to them, but wait to see. One of them might think, if I can get at it from the inside, where it doesn't have this tough, thick outer skin, maybe I can hurt it from there. Maybe from the inside, I'll be able to do some damage. The Kraken that we get in the monster manual, if you are eaten by it, you take a bunch of like acid damage, and I think probably bludgeoning damage as well. And it's like really tough to hurt it from the inside. And I understand why they've done that. And it's fine. But you know what? Octopuses have craws. Why not take advantage and give me some Jonah and the whale business up in here? Yes, come on, who doesn't want to get swallowed by the big alien and then make a heroic explosive exit? Awesome. So for me, instead of having anyone who falls in or deliberately throws themselves into the Kraken's mouth, I would not have them end up in the stomach getting slowly digested by acid, because that doesn't sound fun to me. What does sound fun is being in the Kraken's craw and you and anyone else who's there having to work together to try and like force your way out by just causing as much damage as you possibly can. Some fireballs if you got them. I mean, how many things have we seen this moment in? Men in Black, the first Avengers movie, definitely a dragon in something, but I can't think of what. I can just see the dragon's expression. Oh, it's Hercules. I'm thinking of Disney's Hercules. No, thank you. No, yes, I do. I do want some popcorn. I feel like we've had that moment, that thrilling, heroic moment baked into our minds. Why not let it be a thing that your players can enjoy? Thank you. I got popcorn. I'm just saying, we've seen this in so many of the texts that we consume. Why not let your players live that thing? So I'm going to be disappointed by this next bit, but to me, this singular legendary Kraken, not just a formidable foe, but an insurmountable one, I wouldn't give it hit points. If it has hit points, you can kill it. I don't think that you should be able to kill the Kraken. I think you should be able to do enough damage that it gives up and goes away, but that's like the maximum, I think, for me, that I would want to see happen. You know, unless, similar to the Giants actually, unless you want to build a whole campaign around, you know, we specifically are here hunting the Kraken, we're gonna kill it. In that case, I mean, you know, build up to it over a whole campaign and then let him kill it at the end. But for me, for this, you know, it's a beastie, it's not a boss, this whole angle I'm going for me, I don't think I would have it be possible to kill just by a party who happened to chance upon it on the high seas of adventure. Then the final phase, phase 3, if the players did well during that first tentacle phase and the ship only took minor damage, hasn't actually been like destroyed, then phase 3 probably isn't even really going to be a phase of the encounter. It's just going to be, you know, your post-Kraken maintenance, trying to put things together, rebuild the sail if the mast has been taken down, things like this. So you will have to deal with it, but it's not going to be like high stakes. But if your ship's been torn apart, then even if you manage to do enough damage to the Kraken to send it a running, even in that circumstance, your ship is still torn apart. You are going to be stuck in the water with the rubble. People just trying to find things to float on. And you're out at sea. What in hell are you going to do in that scenario? Ooh, maybe there's such a thing as like ocean scavenger animals who follow in the wake of the Kraken, trying to pick off anything that didn't get eaten. Now you got to face off with them. Phase 3 of that is just trying to survive. Not to mention, potentially trying to survive the whirlpool. Maybe that's phase 3 for the you did good version, is now you've got to deal with the whirlpool because the Kraken's just sunk itself down to the bottom of the ocean. So that's kind of how I think that the classic ship encounter should work. Phases, a little bit video gamey, all in the pursuit of it kind of feeling like this is not something that you can fight and kill necessarily, but it's something you have to fight in order to barely scrape by and survive. Now, an underwater encounter, I think, has to work entirely differently, right? So if you're swallowed by a Kraken, swallowed by a Kraken, then swallowed by a Kraken, thrown up by a Kraken, then swallowed by a Kraken. If you're swallowed by a Kraken above ground, gravity is in play. It's the Sarlacc Pit, thrills abound, lots of exciting things, trying to avoid falling. When you do fall, getting to maybe do something cool on the way. It's big and it's dramatic. When you're underwater, you don't have gravity in play. It's slow, it's simple, it's frustrating. So I think in order to maintain the fun of a Kraken encounter, if you're dealing with it in an underwater scenario, which is already tricky, right? Because underwater combat is a bit of a slog. Let's be real. We gotta change things. The idea of sort of slam weight-based damage, that sort of stuff doesn't work as well. So I want to emphasize some different elements of what octopuses are like. Just like before, I want it to feel more like an environmental hazard. So the ideas I like for this are, you know, if your players are underwater, they're probably looking for something. The players are always looking for something. Give the Kraken a crevice that it can squeeze into. I know the Kraken is huge, the crevice will need to be big, but think about how octopuses scrunch themselves up into these tiny little spaces so that they can hide in reefs or what have you. So I don't know, say you're in an underwater temple looking for the entrance to Atlantis, and in these temple ruins somewhere the Kraken has tucked itself away and it's just sort of hanging out there waiting between meals, and in you come, all barging in, ugly like brown fur cardigan. I want the Kraken to actually get this moment of surprise. It's hidden away, it's blending in. You've got that camouflage aspect of octopuses now to play with. When it's up the top of the ocean, when it's surfaced, it doesn't care about blending in, that's not what it's doing. But down the bottom of the ocean, give me a camouflage Kraken. I'm gonna be terrified of that. I want to emphasize things like octopus ink. Imagine you're at the bottom of the ocean and you're traversing this sunken temple, and suddenly all around you this cloud of inky blackness blots out your vision and something rushes out towards you. It is important for me that this encounter be in an enclosed space, or at least quite a restricted space, even though it is underwater. It might sound a little counterintuitive, because one of the fun things about a water combat scenario should be the fact that you can go up and down. It's very three-dimensional. You don't need to be able to fly to go up. However, have you ever noticed that players don't do that anyway? So I'm not that stressed about making it more enclosed. And what I like about making it more enclosed is that that's where you start to get that environmental hazard again, right? Because once the Kraken comes out of its hidey hole and starts pressing into that space, the players have to find somewhere to go. Because if they don't, they will be crushed or they will be captured and devoured. And then they're in the craw and they have to blast their way out again. With this limited room as well, it could start to break the ceiling. The ceiling starts crashing in. That way you might get a little bit of a sort of a Lord of the Rings-y Watcher in the water sort of a vibe. Now there's a cave in and they're stuck on that side. You could play up the poisonous aspect of octopuses. You could play up the way that octopuses, if you've ever seen them blanket, they see their prey, and in order to try and catch them, because their prey is so fast, they just like spread out and their skin becomes like webbing between their tentacles, and they blanket around it and catch it and then eat it. So that idea of not necessarily being grabbed by a tentacle and shoved into its mouth, but it blanketing over as many of your party as it can and trying to devour them there. So that's much more of a, oh no, you've ended up in its den, you gotta get out in time. And worst case scenario, if they do try to fight it and kill it, you know, that same old thing, if they're inside and they do enough damage, it'll try to get away if your players don't quite take the hint that they should probably run. So those are my ideas about Krakens and how I would run them in my game. Yes, in particular, I think that idea of the tentacles in a surface scenario being the focus of what makes it feel like unusual and different and like it's standing out from just any other combat. You know, it's brute strength, lots of damage. Underwater, more playing up that sort of sneaky aspect of octopuses, that sort of sly and underhanded quality. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma, and I'll see you some other time. Look at me. I could practically be at the movies right now. It's like COVID never happened.